So who manages the trust?
The person that you name to manage the trust. It's
Okay,
the
so-
trustee. Generally, when you create a trust, you're the trustee of the trust during your life. So you manage it. You can name a third party to manage it, or you can name a family member. If you're an elderly client who is at the point where you're no longer managing your normal assets, that would be a situation where you can name a trustee while you're alive that's somebody other than you to manage those assets. But for most people, you're the manager of the trust, which is the trustee during your life, and then you name a successor trustee who's going to step into your shoes after your passing or in your incapacity.
Now, what about those people who pass away and they leave stuff, trust for their kids or their pets or charities, things like that? How does that work?
It works the same way. So you create the trust, you fund it with whatever assets you choose, ideally all of your assets, so everything is in the name of the trust. And whether it's a trust for your children or your pets, or a charity, you basically decide in this trust agreement who gets what and how they get it. So for a standard family, most likely you're leaving in the trust that your spouse gets everything until your spouse is passing. Then on your spouse's passing, it goes down to your children. If your children are minors, you want to make sure you state what ages they should get it, because the worst outcome is that they would get everything at 18 and just spend it on their friends.
Right.
So you hold it in trust for a period of time. Usually the distributions are for health, education, maintenance, and support until they're the age that you determine. A lot of times it's 25. And at that point they can get maybe a third, and then at 30 another third, and at 35 another third, the final third in the estate. Or you can say, I want this held in trust until their retirement age, because you know that the career your child has chosen, they're not going to have a retirement. So you can be as creative as you want. If you have pets that are of high value, like if you're thinking horses, a lot of people think pet trusts are silly, but really if you're thinking about the fact that you own a horse or something that is of high value, you have to actually have something in place to take care of that animal after you're passing. Otherwise, it goes to the shelter, and it's really, after you've spent all this money on this animal, it becomes a horrible outcome for these pets. So you can name in this trust who the trustee will be that will have the management of the assets, and it can be a separate person who would actually have the management of the pet. Same with your child. You can name who the guardian would be,
Okay.
And you can have a separate person who would actually be the trustee. It can be the same person, but it doesn't have to be. Like
Okay.
if you have, a sibling that would be perfect at raising your child, but they're not good with money, that's not the person to have as trustee over the trust that's going to be in place for your children.
Okay.
And if it's a charity, same thing. You would name, what the charity is supposed to use this asset for, when they get this distribution. Usually it's immediately after your passing, and what the amount is, all of those details. And you can be as detailed as you want to in a trust. That's one of the benefits of it.
Now, you were saying that if somebody becomes incapacitated, that you can put that in the trust who's going to manage it or take care of your assets. Now, when you mention assets, you're talking like jewelry, the house that's not underwater,
Cars, bank accounts.
But cars depreciate.
They do depreciate, but it can be the one asset that ends up having your estate go through probate if you don't put it into the name of the trust.
Okay.
What I recommend to my clients is if you plan on having a car for longer than a year after we do your estate plan, it's something you should just put in the name of the trust. Nobody likes to hear that news because it means a trip to the MBA.
Right.
But it's an asset. It's an asset that you own. And if it's an asset, certainly if it's paid off, it's definitely something that is an asset that has to go through probate. Right. If it's a vehicle that literally you just bought and has no equity, again, you're thinking about whether something is a positive asset or not. You don't want to put an asset into the trust that your beneficiaries are going to have to use trust funds to pay off unnecessarily. If it has a lien on it and the lender can just take the asset back instead, then...
Right. So when your clients come in and they sit down with you for the first time, is it primarily just like full disclosure? I mean, what types of things do they need to bring with them when they come to see you?
It really depends on the client. For an initial consultation, you can bring in as much as you want to because it depends on what questions you have. We can get as detailed as you want or as surface as you want, where I basically just tell you what the estate plan would be like in a situation like yours, which can be based on just your family structure. Are you married? Do you have minor children, or are your children adults? Do you have grandchildren that you want to benefit in the estate plan? And generally, what types of assets? So the big question really is, do you have assets that are valued, and this includes life insurance proceeds, stocks, bonds, bank accounts. If you have assets that are valued over $1.5 million, your estate would be subject to Maryland estate tax, which is about 15-16%. So if your assets are over that amount, a trust plan is already going to be recommended just to save estate taxes. If your assets are below that amount, it's really just, here are the things that you can get a benefit from doing a trust plan, or is a will plan going to be better for you? So it really depends on the client, the amount of things that you bring in with you. Once we decide what type of estate plan we're going to do, that's really where all of the disclosures, so to speak, come in, where we need to know what bank accounts you have and what the account numbers are, so that we can help you with funding these assets into the trust if we're doing a trust plan. If we're doing a will plan, there are things you can still do with bank accounts in order to make sure that they can avoid probate. So all of that is what we include in our estate plans.
Okay. You mentioned the Maryland state taxes. Are there federal taxes as well?
Yeah, the federal taxes kick in right now for estates over $5.43 million.
Okay.
So it's for higher net value clients, but certainly when you add in life insurance, people can quickly get up in numbers in terms of the estate size.
Okay.
It's not just bank accounts.
It's not just bank accounts or just the house and the car and those kinds of things. So it does include the life insurance, the stocks, the bonds, those kinds of things.
Exactly.
Okay. So what about land?
That's included as well.
That's included, okay.
And also think about the fact that if you've inherited land from family, like a lot of my clients have land in North Carolina or South Carolina, family land that they've had in the family, and they have a portion of it that they own as tenants in common, which means that they can pass it on to their kids. If you leave that land in your individual name, it requires a probate not just here where you passed away, but a probate in North Carolina or wherever that land is.
Okay.
So that's a perfect scenario where transfer that asset into the trust and you avoid probate in that jurisdiction altogether.
Okay. That's excellent to know. Family does have land. They probably should have done that a long time ago.
Yeah.
So how are fees determined for estate planning?
It depends on the type of plan that we're doing and the kind of provisions that you want in the plan. So we can get as detailed as you want, or as, I don't want to say generic, but as general as you want. Like you can say, my kids just get everything 50 equally split when I pass away, without any kind of additional planning beyond that. So if you want to include guardianship provisions, or need to include guardianship provisions because your children are minors, if you have additional instructions you want to leave to your children's trustee, for example, if you have a trustee or a guardian in mind that is going to need to be able to access funds from your trust to be able to upgrade their living situation to take care of your children. If you have a single person, say, who's going to be the guardian of your kids, and they live in a one-bedroom apartment and they drive a Volkswagen, the little bugs, you want them to be able to upgrade their living situation. So you may want to have provisions in your trust saying to your trustee, give them a distribution to purchase an SUV or something, say, for my kids. Give them a distribution so that they can transfer their household to my house. All of these types of things, you can be as detailed as you want. Also, if you want to have the assets held in trust for your kids, and if they're going through something like a divorce or a tax issue or creditor issues, you can state in the trust plan that the assets don't have to be distributed to them at a certain point if they choose not to be. So say they have access to a third at 25, but they have a divorce issue going on in their life. They can actually choose to leave the asset in the trust and get a monthly distribution or an annual distribution instead for a lot less, so that chunk of money that would normally be coming to them isn't accessible by their ex-spouse or the
Potentially
IRS.
ex-spouse.
Exactly.
Right.
So it can be an asset protection tool for your beneficiaries as well. So if we have those kinds of provisions in the trust, if it's a single trust versus a couple, if it's a will plan versus a trust plan, these are things that would trigger what the fee would be.